All right, 2 Samuel 20. Let's call this one Another Wise Woman and subtitle it The Sword, because even though the primary battle, the one against Absalom, is done, this is a chapter that is going to show us how God's prophecy that the sword would not depart David's household is going to continue to linger on as a part of his reality as, first of all, a man by the name of Sheba, another Benjaminite, relative of Saul in some ways, is going to continue to cause trouble. And even though the other 10 tribes of Israel have committed to making peace with David, Sheba is going to seem to find it relatively easy to turn them against David again. And so David is quickly going to have to put out another fire as Sheba amasses another rebellion. And I guess pun intended, he has now replaced Joab with Amasa, and he is telling Amasa to go rally Judah, understanding that those are our close kinsmen. And he's going to say, come back to me within 3 days. And Amasa's going to take longer than 3 days. And so during that delay, David's going to say, we can't afford to delay. And he's going to send Abishai, not Joab. He's going to speak directly to Abishai. But he's going to say, you got to go chase down Sheba. So Joab is going to go with them as they go chase down Sheba to keep this thing from becoming a thing before it gets any worse. So during the course of chasing down Sheba, they're going to come close to Amasa, who is going to come out to meet them. And Amasa has, of course, taken on the unenviable job of trying to replace Joab, and that's not going to go so well. Because when Amasa comes out to meet Joab, Joab is going to kill Amasa, and he's going to say with a single stroke, not striking him twice. And so he is going to go on from there to continue the pursuit of Sheba to the town in which he is holed up. And as he lays siege to that city with his brother Abishai, there is a wise woman in the city who is going to ask to speak to Joab, because even though David has chosen to replace him, I'm not sure the news got around to everyone who was probably used to understanding that Joab was commander of David's army. And so this woman is going to ask to speak to Joab. Joab is going to talk to her, and she's going to ask the question, are you going to level an entire city? And Joab's going to respond, I have no interest in leveling a city, the heritage of the Lord, but there's somebody in there that we got to get. And so he is going to talk to the wise woman, and once they toss Sheba's head out to Joab, the conflict's done. And so Joab blows the horn, much like he blew the horn once Absalom was dead, and he allowed Israel to flee to their homes. This time, it's going to be much the same. So understand how this wise woman comes in essentially a string of wise people who we see identifying the source of the problem. In a lot of ways, reminding us that Joab once, as we've already said, even though he did it over David's wishes, once he killed Absalom, he really understood that Absalom was the source of the problem. So he, in getting rid of Absalom, ended up opening the door to peace in Israel. Likewise, when he sent the wise woman to David in the beginning of our readings, in many ways, they don't say it literally, but they realize that at that point, Absalom wasn't the problem. It was Amnon who had committed a sin worthy of death against his sister, but was walking around as though nothing was wrong. And so it goes back even before that to Abigail, now David's wife. When David was seemingly getting ready to kill an entire household of people, Abigail appealed to his calmer wisdom, helping him understand the problem was really Nabal, and then going back even further, all the way to Phinehas, who was able to avoid a plague by understanding that in getting rid of those who were bold enough to continue committing the same sin in God's presence, he was able to stop a plague that had already begun to affect the nation. And so understand how our legal system today specifically requires us not to kill people in effective conflict resolution today, but wisdom still requires us to effectively identify the source of conflict and the actual source of wrongdoing, understanding that in this situation, Ahithophel effectively understood the source of conflict. In part was David, and said, if I can kill David, I can end this whole thing. But he refused to acknowledge the actual source of the wrongdoing, understanding that God had already decided what David's punishment was going to be. And when Ahithophel decided that he was going to partner with Absalom, who wasn't willing to let it go, he then put his own life in jeopardy. But understand how in each of these cases, we do well when we understand the source of the conflict. We do better when we understand how God has identified the source of what's wrong. So that we can not only ask God for the wisdom to identify the source of a conflict, but further ask him for the wisdom to deal with the actual wrong that's being done. Learning from Ahithophel so that instead of treating us as part of the problem, he empowers us as part of the solution.